I think the problem that we had found in the US response to this was the problem of scale and the problem of conditionality. The problem of conditionality was that in a globalized world with instant communication, we know in Africa when the US is overlooking human rights infractions when they invest in one country, problems of the LGBT when they invest in another country, problems of due diligence when they invest in another country, where the interests are far more focused. But where the interests are less, conditionalities become firmer about Africa. And so some countries first have to admit LGBT community into the family of the nation completely before we can qualify even for a goer sometimes. And so the point is that conditionality was clearly one of the key areas, whereas other suitors who came to Africa had very little conditionality that needed to be managed. I'm not making the case for a condition-free investment period, but I think that we should look at transitional conditionalities rather than absolute conditionalities. How do we use some of those processes in order to leverage and to build influence and to nudge a society to its better self? So I think that the first one was conditionality. The second issue of scale is the one that I think was withholding the US. The US had a penchant for boutique investments. So when Africa needs 100 megawatts of energy to solve its problems, along comes Power Africa and solves a few boutique problems with renewable energy. And so I think that the issue of scale, when Africa needs to look at its next generation that will soon be 50% of the world's population under the age of 35, and we are feverish about how do we get them skilled, educated, and utilize their talents, the boutique approach is to launch YALI, Young African Leaders Initiative, and to take some of the cream of the crop, but leave the rest to fester. No real imagination with new models about how to build regional universities that could sort out, for example, math and science and engineering issues, and on another part, engineering, management, and a range of other things. So I think that what we need to nudge the US and the West generally towards is a system of transitional conditionalities and a system of greater scale to actually solve the problems. Because I think between the demographics and the current recession that Africa is going through in terms of commodity sales, I think that what up till 2-3 years ago was seen as Africa's greatest competitive advantage, its young, growing population, is increasingly being feared as a possible curse on the world. And therefore, I think that we need to be engaged in finding ways that combine an emphasis on some security solutions to Boko Haram extremism and the rise of anti-democratic forces again, but at the same time, durable investments that can solve the real problems of the continent. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to the questions.